Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 199 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be reviewing Season 1 of The Magicians, a new Syfy Channel series based on the Magicians trilogy by Lev Grossman, who was our guest back in episode 48. And this will involve spoilers for both the books and the show, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by two guests. So first up, we've got Andrew Liptak, who you may remember from our panel on Killjoys and Dark Matter back in episode 167, and our panel on The Expanse back in episode 180. He's the weekend editor of Gizmodo and IO9, and he also co-edited the anthology War Stories, New Military Science Fiction. His reviews have appeared in Clarkesworld, Kirkus, Lightspeed, and Tor.com. So Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us today is Melinda Snodgrass. She's the author of the Circuit series and the Edge series, and her latest novel, The High Ground, will be out in July from Titan. She's also written scripts for TV shows like The Outer Limits, Sequest DSV, and Reasonable Doubts. And her Star Trek The Next Generation script, The Measure of a Man, has been voted as one of the 10 best Star Trek scripts of all time. Together with George R.R. Martin, she edits the Wildcard series of shared world superhero anthologies. So Melinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's start off with Andrew. So Andrew, you've written about how the novel The Magicians really had a big impact on you. So tell us about that.
I don't know if it had an enormous impact, but it was a book that I read when I was a little bit out of college, and it sort of just was one of those things that struck me. I identified pretty closely with some of the characters, even though they were kind of horrible. And they were just, it was one of those books that sort of hit at the right time, and I just really enjoyed it, and I've stuck through listening to it, reading them as they'd come out.
Mm-hmm. And you sort of identified, right, with the, like, what am I doing with my life, and what's the point of everything?
Yeah, it's a little bit of like that sort of like post-college directionlessness of a liberal arts major. I majored in history, and it was one of those things that you major in and you don't quite have a job lined up when you get out. You sort of have to make your own way. So it was a couple of years after I graduated, and it was just sort of, what am I doing and what direction am I going to find? And, it's not exactly, going off and doing like Indiana Jones style trips to archives and things like that all the time, but it's a little bit more work. So I wouldn't say I was surprised by it, but it was just one of those things that it just, they just seemed to coincide nicely.
Yeah. And so say a bit more, like, what did you like about the book?
Well, I mean, it was fantasy, so I sort of enjoyed it for that. But I liked how Grossman had set up a magical academy and basically did it in a slightly different direction than Harry Potter had gone. It was a little bit, it felt modern. It was a little bit, at least I felt a little bit more realistic, and as realistic as a fantasy novel about a magical college can be. And it was just, I liked how the story played out, how these kids basically said, well, adventure's not going to find us, so let's go and sort of go to this fantasy world and find it. And they also find that, magic is really dangerous. It's not this, cutesy thing that can, they get to cast spells with, but there's really devastating consequences.
Right. And you've said, right, that you think the trilogy gets better with each book.
I think so. I've only read the third book once when it came out, and I've read the first one a couple times and the second one a couple times. The second one I really liked, but I liked that one for different reasons. I liked that one because of the structure, where you're balancing Quentin's story and then going back and looking at Julia's story. I liked how they both went back and forth between them, and then they coincided right at the end. Now there's some absolutely horrifying things in the second novel, but it was I thought it was a stronger book overall. And then the third book I really liked a lot as well. It's just been a while since I've read it, and I have to read it again at some point just to get more of the details to sink in.
Right. And so Andrew had a lot of kind of expectations, I guess, going into this TV show. And Melinda, you said that you watched the show first and then read the book. So kind of what got you interested in the first place in watching the show?
I was really impressed with the trailers. Syfy has sort of had a history of doing just awful trailers and, in the past, and this was really intriguing, and I was very interested. And also, there's new leadership over there, and I could see they were making a big difference. So I thought, well, I'm going to tune in and just take a look at this because I had not really even heard of the books, much less read them. Started watching, and I fell in love with it right from the very first episode. I just thought this was fresh and modern, as Andrew said, and I was very excited. So after I'd watched about 4 episodes, I went ahead and got the book, the first book for my iPad, and started reading. And I haven't read on past that first one. I'm told they do get better because my impression of it was that it felt more like an outline to me. Then it felt like the structure was very odd and that it was rushed. I mean, I wanted more time at break bills, and I was disappointed in the book that they seemed to graduate very quickly and then became aimless young people post, and so it was fascinating to be reading the book while I was watching the show and seeing the choices that the showrunners had made that I thought were really smart and just took this whole series up a level. And I can't wait for it to come back. I mean, I've just been really impressed with it, really enjoyed it. And I'm interested enough that I may go on and read the next 2 books, but I'm sort of intrigued with just not and seeing where the show takes me instead, and the way they handle it.
And I mean, I believe Lev said that he kind of was making it up as he went along, and he thinks that he got better, right, with the second and third book, so he might not even disagree with you that the first novel could stand to be developed a little bit more.
Well, it just felt like he was plunging into a world, and yes, it did feel like he was exploring it, but there just didn't feel like I wanted him to slow down, and that's not usually a note. I'm usually the editor on Wild Cards who's going, come on, move this thing along, speed this up. This was one where I wanted to say, take a breath, take your time. Let me see the years that they're going to stay here because I'm interested. I'm interested in the professors. I'm interested in the coursework. And the fact that I think what was fascinating to me is that at the end, or toward the end of the book, after they left Breakbills, there is this sense that, okay, we know how to do magic, but so what? I mean, what does that mean in the real world? How is that a job? How am I going to make money? And I thought that was a really interesting concept because I was a history major too, history and music. You could spit on the street when I graduated from college and hit it out a work history major. And it was like, what do? You have this knowledge and it's cool, but how do I make money with it? How do I support myself? How do I raise a family with this? And that was a very interesting issue that was raised. It'll be curious to see where the show goes with that as they follow the youngsters, through these years at Breakbills.
Right. Well, I want to talk about the pilot episode, which I really thought was really excellent. I mean, my one issue I had with it is I felt that the characters were a little bit one-dimensional, but I really thought the climactic scene where the Beast shows up was just one of the most riveting things I think I've ever seen committed to television. And it's funny, I went to a party at Teresa DeLucci's apartment, and I actually showed the pilot to a couple of people because I got an early copy of it, and I wanted people to watch this scene. And throughout the party, people were all just standing around talking. And then when that scene came on, just the whole room goes dead silent, and everyone turns and is watching the screen, and people are like, "What the hell is this?" I don't know, Andrew, did you have kind of a similar reaction to the pilot?
I was a little surprised at how quickly they introduced the Beast. I mean, in retrospect, it makes sense, but he was a character that was introduced after a good chunk of the book had gone through. They did a pretty good job actually adapting it, and I think what took me a little longer to get used to at first was just how some of the characters looked. Quentin didn't look very much like I had thought he looked, so it took a little while for me to get used to, and I was just a little surprised at how quickly they basically ran through the first quarter or third of the book. Right off the bat.
I agree that they introduced the Beast really fast. I think that had to do with it just being a pilot, and they just had to have some big wow thing in the pilot to sell the series and then to get people to keep watching it if they tune in for the first episode.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was one of the things that they did a good job with. I thought the scene that he came in was really spectacular. What bothered me a little bit over the course of the show was how they didn't quite follow up on it. It seems like they introduced the big bad and definitely showed that magic has consequences, but then they sort of left it alone for a whole bunch of episodes. And there's a whole stretch in the middle of the season that they sort of just go through like the standalone episode thing. And I wasn't quite sure if I liked the show at that point. But once the show started getting darker, that's when it really started to pay off. And I just sort of wish that they had used that as a jumping point to get to the end of the season. It just felt a little dislocated to me.
Yeah, I agree with you that after the pilot, which I really liked a lot, there were there's a stretch of episodes there that I thought were sort of uneven, and I wasn't sure I was going to like the show. But Melinda, it sounds like you pretty much liked it from the beginning, or did you have any of these?
I liked it from the beginning. I thought it was just smart television that they brought in, that they hinted they brought in the Beast, and then it seems to go quiet. And then there's the mystery of Alice's brother and the horror of what happened to him. I mean, I think there was enough going, and I always had the sense, I felt like they did a very good job of kind of quietly reminding me that there was something out there in conversations between the headmaster and the older Jane. You got the sense that, there was something wicked this way comes all the time. I thought that was present. And maybe it's because I hadn't read the books. And so I was able to just say, this is creepy, and be waiting. And so I was anticipating when the Beast would come back, and anticipating, what happened to the brother and how that was going to pay off. That I did feel was one thing that I felt like I would like to have seen that been tied back into the major overplot a little better. And that would have been a change to the book, but it's a different medium, so I would have made that change. I would have tied the brother turning into I can't remember exactly what the phrase was. Niffin would have been something that could have been tied back to the Beast and back to Fillory in a way that wasn't. But I had this sense of dread through the entire thing. And, just low level. And also watching Elliot, who is one of my favorite characters, go from this sort of expansive, very almost amusing character, and then begin to see how tortured he is and watch him slowly being destroyed while Quentin is becoming much more of a grown-up. I mean, I just thought there was such interesting character arcs for these people as well, that I was there they had me, and I was with it all the way to the end.
One of the things that I was a little surprised at is how much I liked Penny in the show. And I really didn't like him in the book at all. And it was just one of those things that I think it was a great casting choice.
Oh, yeah.
And he was really, really my favorite character. And I think that the show would have been a little bit stronger with him in the lead, if they could find a way to do that. But,
yeah, I mean, Quentin is such a difficult character to write. I mean, the sort of fragile, insecure person is a tough person to make your hero. I was actually sort of glad to see it because, to see that sort of character presented as a leading man, which isn't all that common. But Penny was terrific because he actually in the book felt sort of cursory to me. He didn't seem to have much personality at all. If anything, he was kind of a joke. And I like the fact he was this tough-edged guy who thought this was all bullshit, but began to see and became the man who really wanted to save the girl in the dungeon. I thought that was just brilliant casting choice, and he was really well written in the show.
Right, because I read the book when it first came out, and I remembered Elliot and Quentin very vividly, but the other characters, I wasn't even sure that they were in the book at all. Like Penny, is he completely different in the book? I mean, I don't remember that character in the book at all.
No, he's still there. He's a little different. I mean, he's still pretty much the same character. I remember him. I sort of imagine him being this skinny white punk kid with a purple or green mohawk. So that I think the casting choice definitely changed him up quite a bit in appearance. But his attitude was always pretty much the same. And he and Quentin were always sort of at odds and not really. Certainly weren't friends at all. I think that the show really fleshed him out quite a bit more than the book did.
How about the stuff about him being telepathic and transporting between worlds? Was that in the book at all?
That was in there as well.
It was in there, yeah.
I don't think he learned it at the school. I think when it was sort of when he left and went off to he went off to Maine, I think. It's been a little while since I've read the book, but he went off to Maine, and that's when he sort of found some of the Fillory stuff.
Which, all of that happening off stage was, nuts making to me, too. It's like, oh, yeah, I bought it at a jumble sale. What? You got the button that took you to Fillory and it just happened to be at a junk sale and a yard sale? I mean, I thought they handled that a lot better in the show. There was a direct line, a through line that was working. I mean, on the casting, I just want to say one thing that did make me crazy. And I have this complaint about a lot of modern shows. The women all look alike except for Alice. It's very frustrating to me. It's like, does nobody understand the concept of hair dye? I mean, because there were times when I could not tell the difference. Julia eventually became, very clear because she's such an integral character and such a powerful character. But Margot and some of the others,
I mean, did you think it was just a matter of their looks, or do you think that the characters should have had more individuated personalities, or what did you think of that aspect of it?
I think they weren't as well drawn as the men. I think there were, similarities between Katie and the girl who got thrown out of school. And it just took me a while to start to pull them apart and realize that they had different personalities. I mean, Alice is the female version of Quentin, and she really did stand out, and not just because she was blonde, but because she, has a very different personality from some of the other women. And Margot had, obviously a very, the queen of the damned out there with the hedge witches.
I think you have the names a little.
I've got that on right.
Up.
Okay, which one? All right, Margot is not the. Which one is the hedge witch?
Margot is Elliot's. Like the one he kind of pals around with.
And Katie is
the one who's dating Penny. She's like the one whose mom got her in trouble.
And then who had to leave break bills because And who's the redhead who got Julia drawn into all of this?
I don't remember her name.
Yeah, I'm actually blanking on her name.
See, this is the problem. I mean, we're all sort of going, wait a minute. I mean, I'm trying to figure all of you out. But the fact I'm having so much trouble where the men are very clear.
Well, so I was saying that, the early episodes were kind of a mixed bag for me, but when they went to Breakbill South, when they went to Antarctica, I just thought that episode was terrific. And that's where the show really, really caught me. And I was pretty much I was pretty much along for the ride from that point on. I don't know, Andrew, what did you think of that episode? Did you feel the same way about that?
That one was an interesting one just because it was one of the ones that sort of, it seemed like it was the last one that I felt that came out of stage right, and just sort of appeared. They didn't really set it up very well, I thought. It was sort of like all the episodes before it, they were all sort of episode of the week. This is the problem that we're going to do. And it wasn't until they got to the Christopher Plover residence that that was the one that really blew me away, because it really put all the little bits and pieces of the show into context. They talked a little why Fillory was important, why really what the beast was, and that there was some horrible things that had happened. But the weird thing is that the Breakbill South episode was really a pivotal moment in the books. So it was weird just to see that it wasn't. I don't know. I felt that it wasn't as important this time around. That could just be me, though. No,
I think that's fair. I think in the books that's actually one of the more interesting moments, and he spends more time. I think they could have. I think they could have done another episode or half an episode at Breakbill South, and also the professor, the banished professor down there, was such a fascinating character. I liked that a great deal, but I think it was the going to Plover's house that made me I had liked the show, But as somebody who's done a lot of television writing and has done a lot of adaptations, I was just bouncing up and down going, this is genius. Because in the book, it is literally a throwaway line from Jane toward the end of the book where she says, oh yeah, and by the way, this famous author, molested my brother. And it's just a throwaway. And this is after you have found out who the beast actually is, et cetera, et cetera. And they built an entire episode out of one line. And it was a really good episode. It was a very creepy ghost story, and worked really well for me. And watching Quentin's devastation, that was a big character turning point too. So I just thought that was just a marvelous episode and an example of what good adaptation is and how great television can be. I mean, how you can take something into a new medium and do it in this really innovative way.
Something I just remembered is just to go back to the Brakebill South episode is that there's a connection to Alice's brother with that professor, and they never followed up on that.
They dropped the ball.
Yeah. So in the books, the professor at Brakebill South was the one who had he was connected to her brother turning into a Niffin. I can't remember if he was the one that had.
He had slept with a young woman who changed her looks, who tried to become more beautiful. She was in love with this professor. And then Alice's brother tried to help her and was destroyed as a result. They fixed her. And then the professor was banished. So yeah, and they didn't, that wasn't played up effectively, I didn't think.
Yeah, and I think we've been, at least for me personally, I've been spoiled by another sci-fi show, The Expanse, when it comes to adapting a book, and sort of keeping their eye on the larger story as it unfolds. So, that show I thought was a really good example of how you take a larger plot and you basically build each episode towards that larger goal. It's very strategic. The Magicians, took a different track. They didn't do that. It felt like there was a lot more dead time, and I think that they sort of missed an opportunity there.
That's interesting because I didn't have that reaction. I mean, I thought the episodes that obviously weren't working as well for you guys as they did for me, I thought they were very character oriented. I became more and more involved with these people because I had a sense of them, because it wasn't all servicing the plot. And so they had me. I was there. I cared about Alice and her dysfunctional family and Quentin, and his sense of lack of self-worth. And it worked for me that it didn't feel like everything was designed toward, this big finale. And they kept Fillory front and center by making fun of poor Quentin and his obsession with Fillory and this world. And so, but I kind of read for characters and I watch for characters. I need to fall in love with the people, or dislike them horribly, but still be fascinated with them. And I thought they handled that for me very well.
And I read for plot, and I like the larger story. So I think that's probably why we're at sort of coming at this from opposite ends. And
it's weird because I'm the plot person. I mean, I do, extensive structure. Structure is incredibly valuable, but I just thought this was a very good balance, this show, between servicing the plot, the structure, the overall structure, and giving me an insight into the people.
Well, I really liked, Melinda, some of the things you mentioned, like Alice's family I thought was great. But I think those things really happened after the Brakebill South episode. And the sort of episodes 2 through 4 or 5, whatever it was, they felt to me like they were trying to, they were like, the tone was a little inconsistent to me, where some scenes were funny and then some weren't and stuff like that. But then also it seemed like they were kind of overstuffed, like in the second episode, like suddenly there's this magical amulet and Quentin and Penny are shooting spells at each other. And it just seems like all that was happening too fast and too randomly. And that's why I really liked the Brakebill South episode for me, is because that's when, to me, the show kind of calmed down a little bit and felt a little more focused and serious and just sort of like slowed down and breathed a little bit more.
And I felt like they had slowed down significantly from the book. because I felt like the book felt rushed. So, and again, maybe it's because I'm coming at it from having not read the book first. I think there was Julia's desperation, and what was happening to Julia, I think, kept me focused on how truly dangerous this is. And so I think that move, because apparently I gather from people who've read more of the books that Julia's story comes out much more in the second volume than it does in the first. Is that correct?
Yeah, and honestly, her story I thought was the stronger of all of them, especially when you compare her to Quentin. And in the second book, her story alternates with Quentin's. So his is sort of in the present, and hers goes back in the past. And then they sort of catch up with one another. There's no way they could have held it off for the second season, because then it would have been just sort of awkward. So they basically took the structure of the second book and put it in the first season, which I really liked, because that was a really great thing. I always thought that what Grossman did with the second book was he was dealing with a lot more interesting stuff than what we saw in the first book. So you go to Breakbills, and it's this nice orderly magical academy, and they go and they learn their spells, and then he goes and shows us that, well, that's one version of this, and there's other messier type of magic. And I thought that the type of stuff that they were searching for was more interesting and more horrifying and than what they had found in the first book.
I'll just throw in that I've only read the first book, so I can't add anything to that.
So Julia's story in the first season is basically it basically parallels with what you see in the second, her version in the second book. I do think that they had wasted some time with the first couple episodes with her, because she went and I don't know. I felt that it felt like they were sort of spinning their wheels for a little while they tried to figure out what to do with them. And if they had stuck with the books a bit more, they might have the books. It basically in the books, Julia goes and she levels up over and over again, and then in the TV show she levels up and then she gets it all erased, and then she goes into rehab, and then she goes and finds her new friends and goes from there. And that sort of happens in the book, but I thought the book handled a little bit better.
All right, so let's go back to the Christopher Plover house for a second, because I wanted to say something about that, because I think we all really liked that episode, right? I think we all said, right? But I just wonder, like, since we're all so into books, and we've all probably had more experiences meeting authors that, we love their books, then you meet the author and the author turns out to be a disappointing human being. I wonder if that struck us particularly as opposed to just the average viewer.
Well, I read the books before I was really involved in the science fiction world, but I thought it was a really interesting way to sort of twist it, because Quentin loved this world, and he was really, he was really into the Fillory books, and just to have that taken away from him, I thought what was really effective was in the books. They basically said, the Fillory and Further books are there, but they're basically a child's memory of the world, and it's this whitewashed and rose-colored vision, and it's not really, it's not an accurate portrayal of the world. So I thought that was really effective, and I really liked how Grossman played with that. And the same thing goes to the author, or the fictional author here, is that you have this biography built up about him, and then it's sort of horribly dashed when you learn the truth. And in some cases, there's some real world parallels to this. I mean, there's some allegations about Marion Zimmer Bradley.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm sure there's others. So, I mean, it's not an unheard of thing.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say, Melinda, about the Christopher Plover house?
No, I just, again, I guess because I've been writing for longer than I want to mention, I know that experience. So that didn't strike me as much as just how clever it was to take something so small and make it into such a beautiful fleshed out episode, and the effect on the characters. and that was what really worked for me. And also they did a nice job of suggesting and letting you make the conclusion that it was going to be Christopher and not Martin. And I thought that worked very well. Now, but like I said, by that point I had read it. But again, I don't mind spoilers. I'm a person who loves to go to a movie knowing what's going to happen to see how well they do it, how well the structure works, how well the links work. So, I was fine with that. And then I was curious, have they changed the book or are they doing a head fake? And they did a fake, and I thought they did a pretty good job of it.
One of the things I really liked about that episode was also that they got to play with genre a little bit. So in the middle of this sort of epic fantasy or urban fantasy show, you have this ghost story, which is, and it felt very like a very traditional sort of ghost story to me. And I really liked that. It was just it was a nice change from how they'd done things. And I really hope that they do that with future episodes. They get to play a little bit more with some of the other tropes that you see in fantasy. So I guess once we go to Fillory, we'll have the chance to do some epic fantasy stuff. But
right,
maybe there's some other fantasy tropes that have surfaced in literature that would be really fun to play with and just bring to the TV screen.
Well, I have to say, one of the things I was deeply relieved to see is when I was reading the book and they go to Fillory and then there's the scene at the end with all the animals, I thought, this is going to be really hard to pull off and probably embarrassing if they try. And fortunately, they didn't. They didn't go there because cute talking animals, I was like, this show had been felt so grounded to me that if we were going to have cute talking animals, I was afraid I was going to go, oh no. And they didn't. They just have one line out of Elliot saying, well, I was just doing shots with a bulldog. That's it.
It's funny because they in the book, it's a bear, and initially they were planning to get a bear, but they were filming in the winter, and so the trainer said the bear would be hibernating, and there was no way they could get it to do anything.
Really?
Yeah, and so that bulldog, it just belongs to somebody on the crew, and it was like their mascot, and so they just decided to put it in the show.
Oh, that's great. But yes, thankfully, I wasn't treated to whole scenes of people sitting and talking to cute animals, because I think it would have been ugly. I really do.
One of the fun things about Christopher Plover, but I guess I get to plug something I wrote for IO9 a while back. I read a column on science fiction history for Kirkus, and as I had gone back to reread the Magicians books again, and I was like, it would be really funny to do like a fake biography of Plover. And so I went and actually I emailed Lev Grossman and I said, hey, I want to do this thing, and do you have any objection if I bring it somewhere? And he said, no, go ahead. And I had so I basically wrote it up. It's on IO9 now. It's called The Biography of Christopher Plover from Lev Grossman's The Magicians, and it's basically written as this sort of, I guess it's sort of fan fiction, but it's this tongue-in-cheek biography of Christopher Plover. And I was able to pull in some information from the other the history columns that I'd written, and sort of pull him into like this genre history that we have. And, it was a lot of fun to write, and Grossman had a couple of comments for it. He said, no, just change this little detail here and there. And it doesn't quite line up with the TV show, but it's just it does have the creepy parts of Plover implicated in it. And it's basically written as though it's sort of rumor, but obviously we know it's true. So it was fun to write.
Well, that kind of makes me think of Lev's cameo in episode 2. Yeah. Where he's like a Fillory scholar. You see him on TV as a Fillory scholar.
Yeah.
I was going to say too about Plover is there's a line in that episode where he says, in order to do this kind of spell, I'd have to have 6 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then you think about how the beast does have 6 fingers, and there was just something really, really creepy about that idea of adding an extra finger, and then that unlocks this whole new realm of dark magic. I really like that. Yeah.
And it's just this unnaturalness to it. And the other thing, I mean, what I really liked about in the finale was when they talk about how he goes to this well, and he's replacing himself little by little until there's nothing left that's really human. That was really a neat detail, and I really hope that I wish that they had been able to play it up a little bit more. I almost wish that we had we get an episode that from his point of view and basically that flashes back and sort of catches us up with him. Although that would be creepy as hell, but, I really want to see more of that. And it was one of those instances where it was rushed through so quickly. I just don't think that we had enough time to really have it all sink in. I think that's sort of the problem with some of the sci-fi shows right now is that they're all like, they're 10 to 13 episodes. They have to pack a lot in order to get the season, all the story in for the season. So, I kind of wish that they had a little bit more time to play with it.
I was also going to say about just speaking of the six fingers, I thought all the hand gestures they did were really effective. I mean, I totally believe that they were doing magic, and I don't know what kind of training they did to do those hand gestures or something, but I thought it was really, really cool.
I thought they were super awkward.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It just looked...
Melinda, you're going to have to be our tiebreaker here.
I
thought it looked goofy.
The problem was I didn't know what else they could do. I mean, in the books, it's clearly all done with hand gestures, and you really don't want to go to wands. Been there, done that with Harry Potter. I'm not sure what the solution is. I'm kind of coming down a little on Andrew's side. There were moments when, especially when they would do these shots, these close-ups on Quentin's face, and he's concentrating like crazy, and then his fingers are doing all this weird stuff, and it was a little bit awkward. But I don't know what else you use. I mean, I was trying to think how you would handle that without it looking stupid or going back to sort of wells that have already been drunk from a lot of times. And I don't have a very good answer. I really
Okay,
don't.
but in the first episode when the beast comes through the mirror and he's doing the hand gestures, that was creepy as hell. No? Am I the only one?
I think I was so grossed out by the moths that I didn't even notice that. I'm going to have to rewatch that first episode. I mean, there's something terrifying about moths and the way that was handled. I mean, every time I saw one flit across the screen, I would go, oh no, oh God. I mean, they really made that horrifying and very subtle. And so I didn't notice the hand gestures. I was just watching all the moths. And again, that's another change from the book, because in the book, he's holding a branch in front of his face.
Yeah, or isn't there like a tree floating in front of his face? That's how I remember it. Sort of like a Magritte painting.
I just know, he holds a branch. There's a branch in front of his face, and that's okay. But the moths were just, oh God, make your skin crawl creepy.
All right. The other thing I was going to bring up is that you guys mentioned how Quentin is this big fantasy fan. And did anyone else feel like Quentin should have pushed back against Penny more when Penny was making fun of fantasy? I really wanted him to point out some of the many virtues that fantasy literature has.
I think he would have just come off a little more whiny than he actually was. More whiny than he is. I did like. Actually, that scene I thought was really funny. But I did like how meta the show got at points, and like how they were talking about Dungeons and Dragons and Harry Potter and things like that.
Oh, and one of my favorite moments, I mean, one of the scenes that just is when Penny is trapped and he's trying to get a message to Quentin, and he invades Quentin's dream.
Yeah. Where
Quentin is Indiana Jones and one of the girls is Daenerys from Game of Thrones, and he's like, and I guess Princess Leia, and he's like, okay, you are like the nerd king. I thought that was just a gorgeous moment. And it was lovingly done. I mean, I didn't, as a big major geek who's loved all this stuff my whole life, I didn't feel disrespected by it. I thought it was just a great moment. And it said something, and I felt like that was actually a moment where the two men began to have an understanding of each other and start to like each other a little better.
Well, because at the end, Penny does say something like, on second thought, I think you might be some kind of genius or something like that.
Yes. I feel like, Quentin has gone from just this totally useless, whiny person. I mean, the fact that he is telling us that finale, at first I wasn't sure I liked it. And then I went, I think this works beautifully. That, here I thought I'd be the king of Fillory, and guess what? No, I mean, all of those things. And he starts to become a man, an adult. And I started to see a change between he and Penny. And they are growing while Elliot, who seemed so confident and so profoundly in control in the beginning, Elliot is just reduced to a shell by the end. I mean, there's this lovely passage of the characters moving in different directions. Not to get all literary, English lit kind of thing, but I just thought that was really well done.
Okay, so let's see. So Melinda, you really liked this show, and Andrew, how would you characterize your response to the show overall?
Lukewarm. I think it has promise. I think that it's a good start, and I think that once they started going dark, it got a lot better. So it took me a little longer to get on board with it. But once I was on board, I really liked it, and I'm really eager to see what they do with the second season, because it looks like they're going to be changing some things up quite a bit, especially with that scene with Julia, trying to get the Martin to do something for her. I'm really interested to see where they go with that. I think now they've gotten all the characters, they've gotten the voices, they've figured out who they are, and I think now they're in a much better place to really hit the ground running with season 2.
Well, yeah, because the show has it's like 69% or something on Rotten Tomatoes. I would have given it more than that, but I don't know. Melinda, why do you think that you seem to have liked this show more than kind of the average person?
I think it was a combination of things. It was, I think it has gorgeous production values. It's beautiful to watch. I thought overall the casting was very good, particularly with the men. And I'm fascinated. I don't know all the answers, and I want to know more. And so it makes me want to come back. It makes me really disappointed that I have to wait all the way to January of 2017 to see more episodes and to find out what happens and what Julia is up to and what will Quentin and Penny do? I mean, all of these questions. How does Margot figure into this? Not Margot, redheaded girl. The girl with hedge witches. I'm assuming that she will come back because she murdered Margot, one of their mothers. So there's all of these questions that I have that have me intrigued enough that I'm really looking forward to it. And I think, again, at first I wasn't sure about Quentin, but I was sort of delighted to see a very different model for a leading man. I think it's a pleasant change. I mean, I'm getting a little bit tired of the guys who use the razors that give them the Yasser Arafat look and, who are all tough and macho. And there's something compelling about seeing people that feel more real to me than your average heroes in television shows. The show just worked for me on so many levels, and I just found it emotionally very satisfying. So I'm looking forward to it.
Let's talk a little bit more about the finale. You mentioned this is where you actually see Fillory for the most part, and then of course there's the just really, really shocking ending. I was not expecting that at all. I was totally just shocked by that ending.
Which ending? The part where Julia is assaulted? Or?
Yeah, where her memory is restored, and you see the horrible thing that actually happened to her. I don't know. So Melinda, what did you think of that aspect of the story?
I thought it was lovely. I mean, lovely in a horrifying way. I don't mean that. I just thought they did a really good job because I didn't see that coming. I was hoping they weren't going to give us the traditional, and then they take the knife and they kill the evil thing, and Fillory is restored and everything is sweetness and light. And instead they went to some strange, very dark place. And the moment, I mean, because they keep setting it up, people keep saying there's a shade, there's a veil on your memory, and I wondered about it. And then they paid it off at the end beautifully when Ember the god removes it. There, you can thank me later, and what it leads to is this horrific outcome. And it also, she really is such a troubled figure, because from the beginning, she just gets in deeper and deeper. Every choice she makes leads her into greater darkness. And I just thought that I never thought they would go as dark as they did. I don't know if that was in the books or not, but wow, that was quite powerful.
Yeah, that's what that whole sequence is right out of the books. And I was a little surprised that they went there, especially for primetime television show. But and it was also one of those instances where a lot of readers I've spoken with have really been disturbed by that. They went to that length. I interviewed Lev Grossman a while back when he came up to Vermont at a local bookstore here and did a talk, or we did an interview with him. And I asked him about that, and he basically said that, well, it's he was drawing from a lot of really deep literary and mythological things, and it was a very shocking scene, and I was I'm still not quite sure what I think about it. Yeah.
Well, I watched that, Andrew, your interview with him, and I thought his response was really interesting, because he said that, yeah, there's this long tradition in mythology, like Greek mythology, of gods raping mortal women, and how it's just normalized. It's just treated as if, like, oh, yeah, that's the kind of thing gods would do. And that he wanted to push back against that and have that kind of thing happen in his story and show it as the horror and the violation that it actually would be. And
well, one of the main things that a lot of female readers have pointed out, and I think correctly, is that he really his male characters never face the same consequences as the female ones do, and there's really this disparity between them. And I think Julia's story was one. It's present in the first book, but the second book it's a little bit darker, or quite a bit darker, I should say. So I don't know. I thought his response to it was, I was satisfied by it, but I know of some people who heard it and they were like, well, I don't really buy it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's the old, since I haven't read more of the books and don't know where they're going in the second season, is it woman is temptress, woman is Eve, woman who always, opens up Pandora's box and all of those different things. I think they'll take the curse off it if she has agency. And if she manages to turn this around where she destroys, the god who assaulted her, and also manages to take care of Martin. If she ends up getting rescued by Quentin and Penny at all, then that could be problematic. Then we are going back into very old sexist tropes.
There's a real opportunity here for the show to really improve on the books, I think, because they left the fox alive. And just how they played out that scene, I have a feeling that he'll be back, and that what I really hope that they'll do is that he will be sort of the big villain. I hope that they'll sort of take care of Martin at some point, and then that he will become another villain that they'll have to take care of. Because Martin is just this scared kid who's got a lot of power and is sort of monstrous now. Then they do play with, in the books, they do play with gods later on. And it would be interesting to see them take a slightly different track and just have to go after this one specific god.
Yeah, that would be
so.
Yeah.
Who knows? Obviously, maybe a year from now we can go back and
we'll be talking about that. Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. If I was to bet, I would bet that he's going to come. We will definitely see him again.
Yeah, that's certainly what I would imagine. And I heard John McNamara, who's sort of the co-writer, say that they had kind of sketched out, I think it was 5 seasons of this show. And considering that this one season covered like most of what I remember from the first book, and then, as you're saying, a lot of stuff from the second book, I wonder how much they're planning to branch out from what's in the actual books to if they have that many seasons of television in mind.
I think they're definitely going to diverge at some point, because the books have a very concrete ending. And I mean, the first book has a the first book has sort of had an open ending. The second book was was quite a bit less open ended, and then the third book is very much a concrete stop. So they definitely can't do the model of adapt each book for each season, and they couldn't do that with this show anyway.
I mean, also, if you look at this first season, in the books, they go through however many years their break bills, 4? I guess they're 4 years at Breaksville. And then they graduate, and then they're all living in an apartment in Manhattan before they go off to Fillory. I mean, years have passed in that first book. And the impression I have from the show is that they're still in their first year at Break Bills.
They were approaching the college as though it was like a graduate school rather than college.
Because they didn't want it to be high school kids, which I thought was also a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I'll be interested to see if, after all these things that happened to them, in Fillory, if they'll go back to school or if break bills will just no longer be a thing. But that'll be interesting to see how they resolve that.
I think they're going to have to, I think break bills and break bills South have to be a touchstone. I think if they lose that, I think we're not as grounded as we would have been. And I also found the headmaster, who diverged significantly from the headmaster in the books. I'm interested in that character. He does give Quentin the warning, this is your last chance, We've had this conversation 46 times before, which was a very nice, moment. So I'm kind of hoping they do keep break bills, because I think they need that as a sort of return point, the place we go back to.
I agree with you about the Dean being a terrific character. Just the part it cracked me up so much where he was talking about Groundhog Day, and he's like, I still haven't watched it. It's become a point of pride for me now.
Yes.
But even just the scene where he says, I taught myself magic when I was 4 years old. I'll do it again, very calmly. Mm-hmm. And then you see when he's in private how he's losing his temper. I thought that was just such an interesting character moment.
Right. And I'm sorry we lost Jane as quickly as we did. That was an interesting, because we see her at various ages, and that was just another thing. I don't know. The show really worked for me on so many levels, and I was so intrigued by it.
Does anyone else question? I have the same issue with Harry Potter, but why the professors don't seem to do more to help the students save the world?
Yeah, I did. I know, because it was one of the things that drove me mad in Harry Potter. It's like, would you just go tell Dumbledore that, these problems are happening? But they did seem to imply, the headmaster did seem to imply that Quentin is different. He's not the best magician, but there's something about him. And the beasts seemed fascinated with him too. So clearly, maybe there was a reason, and maybe that will become, I think that's something they need to answer, because they hinted at it very strongly, that Quentin is a fairly unique figure. And why is that?
Right, like why is it a secret that Fillory is the real place and that Martin Chatwin became the Beast and stuff like that? Like, Andrew, I don't know. Is there ever an explanation for that?
Why Martin became the Beast?
No, why the professors keep it secret from the students that has happened?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I can't think of a reason, but that doesn't mean I'm just not remembering it.
I guess I should probably read the other books.
Well, he doesn't show up in the other books, but yeah, I don't remember why. Even in the books, the professors were pretty detached. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing where it just felt like in the book it felt very cursory, that for the years at Break Bills, because I wanted a little better sense of some of those professors, which is why I'm kind of hoping they keep Break Bills around and give us more insight into, how do you end up a professor? Is that the only way you can make a living if you're a magician, is to end up teaching at one of the colleges? And they indicate there are colleges all over the world. Break Bills isn't the only one.
Yeah, and Quentin actually becomes a professor in the third book for a little while.
Oh, okay.
Not that hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler, but
no, like I said, I don't care. I love spoilers.
Well, no, because I just read that the books cover the like Quentin and so on from the ages of 17 through 35 or something. So obviously they're not going to be able to do that. So they're going to have to make major changes to compress that sort of character growth and those kinds of things. And I totally agree with Melinda that they should keep break bills in as the touchstone. I think they have to do that. But what you're saying, Melinda, though, about what do you do after break bills makes me think, of course, of Alice's parents. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just such a great scene, or a great sequence in the show, where you see the sort of aimlessness of the break bills graduates who have all this power but no quest, right?
Yeah, no purpose. And it felt like Lev Grossman was talking about that even when the kids graduate in the first book, and they're all living this rather aimless life in Manhattan. It was a real interesting look at youth and what do you do with it? What does education ultimately mean? What's my purpose? I mean, that was one of the things I really did like about the book. Like I said, I was a little disappointed in the structure, but I thought the questions, it rang very true about what it's like to be 20 years old or 21 years old and be facing these choices. And yeah, I mean, magic is, how do you make it feel real? And how does it function in the world? I mean, if magic were real, why aren't they doing something? I mean, if you look at Harry Potter, they can grow fabulous gardens. Well, why is there mass starvation? Why aren't the magicians, the wizards and witches doing something? It does seem like a very selfish society. And I wonder if they're going to get into that in any way.
Well, you could say, why aren't we in the first world doing anything to help the third world, right? Like, don't we have sort of a similar relationship to a lot of people in the world as magicians would have to us?
Well, but this is magic.
This is magic. I mean, that's the thing. It's not easy to take drought-stricken areas, but we have people, if our fantasy world exists, we have people who can affect the weather, who can make it rain, who can make plants grow. We're faced with the limitations of what can actually be done. Yes, we could do more, but it does seem like you always run up against the problem that if magic is real, why isn't everybody who is a magic user rich and gorgeous, and happy or doing something for the world? I mean, that's...
Well, no, but because if you use a spell to try to make yourself pretty,
well,
bad things happen.
Bad things happen in this world, but Hermione fixes her nose in Harry Potter, or teeth or something. I think it's her teeth.
Yeah,
so
it's the teeth,
yeah, it does something. Everybody takes a slightly different tact, but you always run up against the why aren't they doing more? If this is real, where is it present in the world, and how could it be present in the world? So. But I have a feeling this show might actually kind of go there, because it does feel very modern, the way Andrew said.
Because I kind of thought what The Magicians was about to me was how nothing's ever going to make you happy in a way. I mean, we sort of go through life thinking, oh, if I just sell a novel or, become rich or famous, so then I'll be happy. And I don't think any of those external things ever really make you happy. And this is saying, you could even go to wizard school. You could go to a magical kingdom. You'd still be you. You'd still have... I'm sorry?
You could become the king of Fillory.
Yeah, you could become the king of Fillory. You'd still have, if there's nothing inside you making you happy, nothing outside of you, however incredible it might seem, is ever going to do that for you.
I agree with that completely. Certainly, it was very clear in the books that was what he was talking about.
All right, cool. So Andrew, anything else you're hoping to see in season 2?
Well, I hope we'll get some of the material that we saw in book 2, because despite the fact that they got Julia's story, there's still another half of the book that they haven't covered yet, and it takes place chronologically after this book. So hopefully they'll at least cover some of that. We'll get out into the world a little bit more. We'll see some more Fillory. We'll see some more of Earth. I hope that they will tighten up the story a little bit and just make it, take in some of the lessons that they might have learned from the first season and just sort of tighten everything up from beginning to end. That'll make me really happy. But yeah.
All right, cool. And so, Melinda, any other requests or advice for the showrunners?
I mean, tie back into the brother. That would be one thing I would say. Alice's lost brother. I think that needs to be paid off in some way that hasn't been. And I want to know what's going on with the hedge witches. Because I think that's a thread that needs to be picked back up and crocheted back in again.
All right, cool. So hope we see all that in season 2. And I think we're going to wrap things up there. So we've been speaking with Andrew Liptak and Melinda Snodgrass. So guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to Andrew Liptak and Melinda Snodgrass for joining us on the show. And remember that Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd rather make a one-time or fixed monthly contribution, you can do that via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.